Welcome to the Insomnia Project. Sit back, relax, and listen as we have a conversation about the mundane. One thing that we can promise is that our conversation will hopefully be less than fascinating so that you can just feel free to drift off. Thank you for joining us. We hope you will listen and sleep. I'm your host, Marco Timpano. Follow us on Twitter at Listen and Sleep. And give us a 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever you find us. I am very pleased to have in the studio with me a dear friend, a colleague, a comedian, someone I respect and admire. Ali Hassan, welcome to the Insomnia Project.
Thank you very much, Marco. This is challenging.
Is it?
To keep my charged up emotions bottled up, but as it turns out, the hangover that I presently have is really lending itself well to this energy level.
Do you have any hangover cures?
I have Gatorade in the car right now.
Gatorade.
I'm sipping Gatorade is a big one. I cramp up a lot.
Oh.
Pretty much without fail, if I have a coffee and 2 beers,
Yes.
I'm going to get cramps like
my
in my
goodness.
toes, calves, somewhere. If I do 3 days of drinking in a row, it's going to be very bad. I remember once it was like 6, 7 in the morning. I was in Chicago, and I started cramping up right here. What would you call these muscles? The inside of your thighs?
Yeah,
here.
I'm not sure what the muscle is, but inner thigh. Yeah.
Well, the inner thigh, both of them cramped up. And I basically had to lie there spread eagle.
Oh, my goodness.
And, I was like, if anybody sees me right now, because a bunch of guys had come over to New York to visit us. So people sleeping in the living room, and I'm on the floor of the living room, just
Cramped
spread
up.
eagle.
Wow.
But also going like...
So a sight for sore eyes, in other words. Look,
Exactly.
I'm not a doctor.
However,
Could it be magnesium? A lack of magnesium?
I didn't know about the magnesium. I know about potassium.
Oh, maybe it's potassium.
Okay, so you are.
Potassium. But magnesium wouldn't hurt.
You know what? You started off with, I'm not a doctor, and you were right.
I just, I randomly recommend magnesium to anyone who has any sort of,
great.
issue. They're like, I ran into traffic on the way here. You know what? Magnesium would help you.
My father-in-law, it's water. Have a glass of water.
Water helps.
Everything,
for sure.
everything. It doesn't even matter. I think I broke my ankle. Have a glass of water.
Yeah. Well, it can't hurt, right?
I mean,
Anything else could hurt.
It can hurt.
I will say this. Well, first of all, what is your drink of choice? Like, what were you drinking that
It
brought
was
on this?
beer. It was
Oh, just beer.
It was like, but by the end, it was like 7 beers, and then it was like 12, 15, and I'm like, okay, I'm hungry. But we were in a little strip on this road where all the restaurants are closed except Pizza and 7-Eleven are open. Went against everything I stand for.
Sure.
And went to 7-Eleven and bought like $17 worth of different snacks for like the 3 of us. And first of all, what happens in those situations is everybody judges you and laughs at you and goes, what in the world? You got taquitos and chicken wings from a 7-Eleven, you're a disaster.
Fair.
And then you can count down 60 seconds pretty much. And before you reach 0, everybody's kind of digging in. Well, since this beef patty's here, I may as well.
Not let it go to waste.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you like to eat and drink.
Sounds to me like you're a master of segues,
Well,
Marco.
I wouldn't say master, but I know where to find one when I need one.
Yeah.
The reason we mention that is tomorrow, our podcast, another one from Insomnia Project, our podcast is going to launch.
Very exciting.
And it's called Eat and Drink with Ali Hassan and Marco and Timpano. I can't even say my name right.
Well, you're excited.
I am excited.
You're excited. I mean, if that's not proof, then what is?
And this came about because we both have a love for food, drink, the social aspect, the tangible aspect. Your background is what we call back of the house.
Right. And Marco's been a front of house guy for years. We felt like we complemented each other very nicely. And you last night you sent me kind of your bio, which is what do you want to call it? A cathartic exercise almost of like, this is my life? Oh, God, what have I done? And I had to do the same thing. And I'm like, was that 2004?
I know.
Till 2007? 3 years I did that? I hated every day of that. You know what I mean? You have to go
It
through that.
felt like a wasted life on paper. When I
did.
looked at all the random sort of Joe jobs that I had, I was like, I can't believe I did that for so long.
Yeah.
But it brought us to a podcast, which I invite our listeners of the Insomnia Project, if they need something to wake up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a passion-filled project.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can guarantee that. Yeah. Don't you imagine we get email with people saying, thank you, eat and drink really has been helping me fall asleep. What the?
You know, it's interesting you say that because there are people who listen to the Insomnia Project to wake up, or not to wake up, but while they're getting ready in the morning. I have some listeners who will email me and say, I listen to it because I don't like to listen to CNN in the morning. It gets me really distracted and I prefer to listen to something.
Well, if you compare this to like that jarring alarm sound, like this is pretty much it's a really calm. Oh, I wouldn't have thought about that until you mentioned it. And of course, that's an obvious good fit.
And we have people who use it when they fly, if they're on the plane and they find it difficult. They're difficult flyers or whatever you want to call it. They'll listen to it because it sort of distracts them from the takeoff and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay.
So much like food can distract you from various anxiety or anxious-filled moments, let me ask you, what is your go-to snack? Since we were talking about snack, what's the one thing where you're like, if I could have this whenever I need it?
When I go to a restaurant, if there's nuts and olives, I'm usually pretty happy because it's going to take some time for me to decide what I want, especially if it's a nice restaurant, more creative chefs in the back.
Sure.
So I'm starving. I want to have a drink, but I don't want to get loaded right away. There's nuts, there's olives, great. Now I'm happy. Get some chili roasted cashews and a variety of olives, and now I'm
Interesting
calm.
you mentioned cashews, since that one's not a nut, but rather a legume. What is your preferred nut or / legume? I was just showing off there, by the way.
You're definitely showing off, and I'm gonna have to cross-check that because Marco does something where he with great authority, he delivers some news, and then he goes, I could be wrong about that. Yeah. You always have that lurking in the background. Either you say it or then you...
I often say take it with a grain of salt, too, because A, I love that expression, and B, it sort of discounts any sort of validity to what I'm saying.
I'm hoping this one is heavily salted because I want cashews to be a nut because there is a program, if you want to call it that, my wife and I follow from time to time. We're going to be following called the Whole 30. You have to give up legumes, but you can eat nuts. So you may have ruined my life.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
Anyway,
I'm good at that too. You mentioned Chicago.
Yes.
You lived in Chicago.
Yeah.
I love Chicago. Tell me about your Chicago.
My Chicago is about to be ruined because I'm planning a vacation there with my wife and daughters in December. We're going to have the opposite of a time that I would have if I was alone.
Okay.
They're not going to eat oysters with me. They're not going to have, my wife's probably not going to have a dirty martini with me. She's not,
Is it the Pump Room? Is it the Pump Room?
There is a Pump Room.
Yeah, that's famous in Chicago. Yeah, sorry.
I think, is it famous?
I think Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, everyone.
There was the Green Room. The Green Mill.
I'm thinking the Pump Room.
Okay.
Well, look, there's two places you got to go, whether your wife comes with you or not. But anyways, you were saying, sorry.
But Chicago to me is like a city that took its music and its food so seriously. They just weren't messing around.
Yeah.
Of course, you can find a generic, but and then there was this diversity of you can find just the best tacos I had for $2. $1.50. This is 2000, 2001. I'm sure they're $3.50 now.
Sure.
But for $1.50, so less than $5, you get 3 tacos with steak. The steak's obviously been marinated for a long time or pounded in a way where it's just perfect. You're not chewing it for too long. It's just great meat with a couple of different salsas, some onions and tomatoes, and you're off to the race. And now you're like, why have I wasted time with all this fast food in my life when these options are here, And then if you wanted to sit down, obviously Charlie Trotter was a big thing. The reservations, it was 3-4 months before you could get. And, there was 5 of us who wanted to go together. And I was like, I think I'm going to cheat on these guys. I think I'm just going to go alone. This 5 thing is really jamming us up. It's really going to create issues for us
course.
getting a reservation.
Because it's hard. Seating 5 is harder than seating 6.
Of course, but my gluttony
Right.
is such that I'm like, if I go with 5, I can try 7 different dishes. If I go 1, I can only try 2, maybe 3 if I push it, you know?
You say gluttony, I say an appreciation for finer things in life, like food.
Thank you so much.
So, and I can thank you
There is
because
a
you
fine
certainly brought some insight to cooking, food, particular South Asian cuisine. So great. So this will be the last plug I have for Eat and Drink. Listen to that, and you'll hear us get into little scraps and whatnot too.
Sure.
On different opinions.
Sure. That'll wake you up. That'll wake you up.
I should mention, not necessarily I should mention, but I want to mention that you're also the host of a great program called Canada Reads on CBC. And I mention that for our international listeners who may not be aware of A, the great authors that we have in this country where we record and broadcast from, B, this program, how great it is and how unifying it is for the nation, and C, your great talents as a host. So let me ask you this. Canada Reads, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'll explain to people who won't be familiar with the format. It's 5 personalities, Canadian personalities of varying degrees of celebrity. They pick a book by a Canadian author and they say, this is the book that all Canadians need to read, right? They follow some theme typically for the year and they say, you know, last year it was about empathy. You know,
which the world needs.
Which the world needs. So it was a great theme to have, and people have less and less empathy. They can. It seems like people can't put themselves in other people's shoes. It's just like this complete lack of compassion we see way too often, or we hear about so often. So the theme was along those lines. And so we got introduced to a number of different. You start with this long list of books, and then the celebs, these personalities, they zero in on the one. They're like, this is the one.
They champion the book. They champion the author in the book.
Yeah. And then there's 4 days of lively debate until there's one winner. Every day somebody gets knocked off. So that's the unfortunate and cool part. It's a game show format, so that's great. But then the game show format also gets people pretty riled up when the book that you have everything riding on and literature is that thing like, let's say you're on vacation somewhere and you meet somebody who has watched the same TV show as you. That is nowhere near meeting somebody who just read the same book you read.
Yeah.
It's like a very special connection, even though there's like millions of people reading millions of things. It's not so different from TV or film consumption anyway. But something about like, oh my God, you read that. And it's like, we're in a special group. You and I both read, you know what I mean? Like if you've ever experienced that, it's really, really special. And so it's funny to see like Canadians getting angry and passionate about literature. And it's like, for me to have even my small role in it as the host, I'm so proud and happy to be part of that. And then, as a testament to how good it is, actually the U.S. probably has sort of it has borrowed that format, and PBS is going to have the Great American Book or something like that. The Great American Book. It's something like that. Anyway.
Well, you should be host of that, too. I'm sorry.
Be the host. I think Margaret Atwood is going to be one of the judges.
Well,
it's like, come on.
If they don't have you as a host, they're making a grave mistake, let me say that.
Do you hear that, people?
PBS, pay attention.
Yeah.
Is there a commonality that you find in Canadian literature or the books that are featured on that show? Is there something that unifies Canadian authors?
No. I have not seen that. Last night I moderated a panel with 3 Indigenous writers, all 3 women. A lot of Indigenous writing has a shared has shared themes like trauma.
Sure.
Obviously,
right.
Because of the community and what they've been through and continue to go through. Wisdom of elders, nature. The earth, Mother Earth, plays a big role. So you see that with certain types of writers from certain communities. But as far as Canada goes, it is so diverse.
Wow.
It is so diverse. And I've had to read books kind of as homework for Canada Reads.
Sure.
And because of Canada Reads, I'll moderate or host other panels. And I never want to be on the spot where the author looks at me and goes, oh, have you not read the book?
Yeah.
I can't even fathom what that would feel.
Right.
So I go out of my way to make sure I'm like well prepared. And
Right.
sometimes the book never even comes up. It's just a chat with the person about their life. And
Sure.
the funny thing is, I will never ever be like, well, that was a waste of time to prepare, because what did I do? I read a book. You can't lose. It's like the water. It's like my father-in-law with the water. Drink some water. Read a book.
Read a book.
Can't lose.
You can't lose. You really
How can that
can't.
hurt you?
I mean, I'm a huge proponent of literature, libraries in particular. I have the great fortune I'm going to be at the Waterloo Library hosting their after-hours fundraising event, and I can't wait for that. Let me ask you this. Would you ever want to write a book?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. And it actually would have a connection to food,
Sure.
not surprisingly. There was a time where I managed a restaurant called Bombay Palace in Montreal. For the purpose of the book, Montreal might not be the same. Montreal would stay there, but it would not be Bombay. It would be called something else,
Sure.
I imagine. But what a ridiculous time of my life.
Oh, isn't it? It's
this-
insane when
It's
you
insane.
work.
And I wasn't a good manager. I learned at that job that I don't like telling people what to do. So I had my own challenges as a person, and then as far as my identity goes, like I don't like what I'm doing. And then there would be like the Bengali waiters would be mad at the Indian chefs in the kitchen. So they're always messing with me. I ask what this, they give me something else. Like just constant war. And I was like this Pakistani mediator between these Bengalis and Indians. And I was like, how did this happen? And just real cast of characters. Well, I'll tell you one story just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with
This
here.
could be a chapter from the book. I'll transcribe this for you.
Exactly. So there was a guy, Sammy, Bangladeshi dude. Side note, Scottish accent. A customer once told me that guy is not from Scotland. I was like, what? She goes, I just asked him where he's from. He told me where he's from. I asked him if he knew a place. And he said, I think, I have heard of that, actually. And she goes, it's like somebody in Montreal saying, yeah, I think I have heard of the Olympic Stadium.
Right.
Of course. She's like, he's not who he says he is. I'll tell you that right
Ooh.
now. Yeah. But this guy, thick Scottish accent,
Sure.
It made him charming. It got him the best tips. People loved him. Is Sammy in? They would ask for him by name. They wanted to be served by him. But who he really was, we don't know. So
It's a
anyway,
mystery. What do you like in books? What do you gravitate to? Is there a type of fiction, nonfiction, or something that?
my attention span is such that short stories are my favorite.
Okay.
I really love short stories, and I feel like I get more out of them because I'm so I'm like, oh, 19 pages. This is amazing. I can read every word and
Sure.
really savor it. Whereas in a longer 400 or 500 page book, it's like, there's chunks where it's like taking a long drive, and at one point you're like, what have I been doing the last 10 kilometers?
Right.
I literally just feel like I just woke up. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Sometimes it's like that with books where you're just, particularly when it's like very heavily descriptive.
Yes.
That's not for me. And with no disrespect to the Margaret Atwoods and the Alice Munros of the world, I get it. It's cold and it's gray.
Sure.
I don't need 5 pages to describe that. People love that. I'm very, very, I'm a big fan of short stories. But if they aren't short stories, I'm a big fan of dialogue.
Okay.
I love a lot of dialogue. I love hearing people, communicate with each other as much as possible in a book. That keeps me really, really engaged. And I think those are the things that conquer my poor attention span. My attention deficit is conquered by dialogue or.
And your love for dialogue bleeds into your ability as an actor and your performance, right? So
I'll
it
read a
stands to reason.
script with great passion. In fact, some of the printing that you do is on the back of these sides, these
right.
scripts, and I'm almost more interested sometimes in reading the dialogue. Hey, what was this?
What was on the back of this?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm also enjoying script writing. I've been doing a fair amount of
great.
that in the last 3 years.
There's a
which is-
great book I'm going to tell you as a scriptwriter that I think every scriptwriter needs to purchase. And I have no connection to the author. I couldn't even tell you the person's name. But it's called The Hollywood Standard 2.
Two.
It's the second publication or second
Okay.
edition of it. And the reason I say 2, and I'll show it to you because I have it upstairs, is the book is larger. So the actual size of the book, the physical size of the book, is the size of a standard page that you would have on a script. And what it is a resource book of almost like an encyclopedia when you need to know how to write dual dialogue while one person is on the phone and the other person is off screen. You flip to that little chapter and it'll tell you, it'll show you and what it would look like on a page because it's the exact size of a page.
Right.
Any little thing where you're like, how do I write a scene where the person is a ghost and can only be heard by one person in the scene, right?
God.
And so you look it up and it'll tell you.
It's there.
It's there.
They've thought of
and it can be
everything,
something as simple as how do I write a scene that the interior is in a car? And it'll tell you to something much more complicated. And it has been, I took it out from the library because I get most of my reading from the library. And after I read 3 pages, I'm like, I need to buy this book.
Yes.
And that was that.
And, that's particularly important because I'm sure you know this. There's some people who are like, if something's written a certain way, I'm not even going to read it. You know the way a resume is thrown out when it has a spelling mistake?
Yes.
So somebody goes, why are they putting entire action paragraphs in bold? Why is this all in bold? I'm not going to read this. Amateurish.
Sure.
Right? Or why is somebody's name not capitalized the first time we see? Why is this written like this? Why wasn't this a reveal? What is it? Why are 10 scenes in a row cut to?
Yes.
Why is all the transition cuts when it shouldn't? All these kind of things get somebody annoyed pretty quickly.
Of course.
If you're not following format, it's fairly rigid, the industry in that case. You can't do, your writing can sing in a variety of ways, but as far as convention and format goes, there's not too much room for movement there.
And it stands to reason if you're a person who's reading script after script after script, you need that sort of standardization in order to get through them and anything, or like to be able to comprehend them in a manner which is relevant to film. Because you can visualize when you see the interior classroom day. You already know what's going on there. You don't have to. It sort of registers quickly, and you sort of need that convention in support of people who make sure that scripts are standardized like that.
I'm sure I mean, you must have seen this where somebody goes interior classroom early morning. And people lose their mind. It's like day or night. That's it. It's just day or night. There's no early evening. No. There's no middle of the night. There's none of this. And right away you make that mistake and you're regarded as like some kind of a buffoon. Yeah.
Less than, if you will.
Less than even. The Hollywood standard too. I will keep that in mind.
I'm gonna show it to you before you leave. Okay. Sorry for the rest of our listeners. But then again, just use your library card. See if it's for you. I love libraries. I do.
I just did a fundraiser for Vancouver Public Libraries.
Oh, wow.
They opened up these 2 new floors that had been occupied by the government for 30 years or something. And these floors have been transformed into this beautiful, beautiful spaces. And there was a fundraiser, $575,000.
So great.
In their first year. They're very happy about that. Yeah.
You got to love that.
You got to love it. And when you go to, Vancouver has like a housing crisis and this huge disparity of wealth and homelessness and opioid issues. And the library takes everybody.
Yeah.
Library takes everybody. It's like a safe haven.
Yeah.
You come in, you look like you've had a rough life, not just a rough day, and there's somebody there to be like, is there something I can interest you in reading?
Sure.
It's unbelievable.
It's a beautiful sort of equalizer when you have access to books and other resources that a library does. And you see in every library I've ever noticed, whether I was in New York, whether I was in Berlin, or whether I'm at the little tiny library that's just up across from my street. It's the smallest, most quaint little library, and I love it.
Yeah.
And you see people who speak the language, people who speak different languages. You see people who are tall, people who are short, people who are round, people who are thin, people who are, every different type of person in there. Like you said, people who are wealthy, people who aren't wealthy, kids, the elderly, and they're all treated the same, and they all have access to things that speak to that.
Yeah.
And there's something about that I find so endearing. And one of my fears is always when you get a politician in play who wants to cut funding to things like libraries. And I find that so disheartening.
Yeah.
But what I don't find disheartening is a conversation with you. Ali, thank you so much.
You may have gotten too passionate at the end.
Did I? Did I get? Maybe
well,
I did.
It's libraries, and it's obviously close to your heart.
It is
and you were
close to
talking
my
about, and I know how you get about politicians who are like, who favor only the wealthy.
Yes.
So I happened, and I felt that was coming up too. Your color was raising a little bit, but hopefully this helped some people with whatever they needed it to do for them.
And I hope so. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And listen to our joint podcast, Eat and Drink.
It's going to be amazing. I must say that with passion.
Thank you.
It's going to be amazing.
And it starts up tomorrow. Till then, as always, the Insomnia Project is produced by Drumcast Productions, and this particular episode was recorded in Toronto, Canada. Until the next time.